Built on the bones of Doom and chock full of magic and snakes, Hands of Necromancy is an old-school Metroidvania first-person shooter that will remind many of classics like Heretic and Hexen. Developed by HON Team and published by Frechou Games, Hands of Necromancy squeaked onto Steam earlier this summer of 2022, and has been quietly gathering a fan base of gamers enthralled with its focus on exploration, scorching sorcery, and mana-filled mayhem. Is Hands of Necromancy worth summoning into your Steam library? Well, today, we're gonna find out. Let the conjuring begin. Broken up into 3 distinct chapters, in Hands of Necromancy, you play as the Necromancer, and things are not looking too hot in the Necromancer's world. Horrific monstrosities, typically disorganized and fearful of weapons and magic, have invaded the lands of humans, slaughtering and burning all in their path, and our Necromancer is having none of it.
Why do these creatures disturb me? I must seek them and destroy them.
Grumpy as hell, he sets out to blast these monsters into bits in an effort to save mankind, and also demonstrate to them his own immense power. Oh well, someone has an ego. Narrative is on the light side in this game, which should come as a little surprise to fans of this genre. It mainly relies on text screen interludes to keep players keyed into the plot, which succeeds at painting a picture of what's going on, but the writing leaves something to be desired. In dire need of an edit pass, not to mention some spelling and grammar fixes. Fortunately, I do think levels lend enough detail to where players can glean story details or come up with their own to fill in the blanks. I also appreciate our Necromancer, who exudes a sinister anti-hero personality, which is always fun to inhabit in these sorts of games. I couldn't help but think of him as a sort of medieval fantasy version of Caleb from the Blood series, largely due to his bloodthirsty cackles. Hands of Necromancy is one of the latest commercially released indies built in GZDooM, a source port of John Carmack's Doom engine updated with all sorts of contemporary bells and whistles. While other GZDooM efforts try to push the tech beyond its limits, like the upcoming Sulaco, Hands is content in keeping the presentation firmly within the bounds of what GZDooM is capable of, in what I would say is an effort to create something that could have been released in the mid-1990s. And you will find no complaints from me on that. Visually, the game showcases a dark fantasy theme that admittedly holds few surprises, and will feel familiar to most fans of the subgenre, but that doesn't mean it isn't executed with skill and passion. To me, the graphics are nothing short of retro splendor. Sure, it has that dated Doom engine flatness to it, but there's a nice sense of depth and texture to the, textures. There's certainly crunchy, low-res retro, yet decently detailed, giving the environments a bit of grit to them. Every once in a while, you may come across a blurry texture, which is unfortunate, but not enough to sour the entire view. Necromancy doesn't get too detailed with its lighting, but it does create a good sense of atmosphere and spookiness, especially in levels taking place in underground places like tombs. It also gets a little help from some modern touches, a bit of bloom and some reflections, which actually look quite nice. And the sprite work is beautifully done, giving distinct character to each foe, with death animations that I have to imagine would get the Adrian Carmack nod of approval. A nice trend for many of the GZDooM engine games is their excellent sound design, and Hands of Necromancy is no exception. Gameplay is detailed with the groans of monsters, the zoom of approaching fireballs, and the squish of falling guts. Sure, not all of the sound effects land. The bones thrown by the zombies sound like an old woman clapping her lights on.
Clap on, clap off, the clapper.
But the tapestry of sound here makes it easy to get immersed in this game, and the soundtrack, which I feel is very, very reminiscent of mid-90s shooters, fits this game snugly like a magic ring. Unfortunately, in chapters 2 and 3, there's a noticeable drop in detail and geometry complexity, with the levels becoming more open to facilitate larger combat scenarios. Great for gameplay, sure, but a bummer on the eyes. I mean, compare this level from chapter 1 to this in chapter 2. Oof, looking a little empty and simple. That's not to say there aren't some great sights in Chapter 2 and 3, there definitely are, especially in the final levels, but it is a little disappointing the graphical quality wasn't more consistent throughout the game. Also, I ran into some performance issues on the more geometry-intensive maps, sharp frame dips and stutters. I was initially playing on OpenGL and switching over to Vulkan improved some of this, but even in that mode I still hit patches of slowdown. Disappointing. Hopefully we'll get some patches to help clear this up if there haven't been already. Regardless, if you're a lover of that mid-90s Doom engine look, there's a lot to appreciate here. Indeed, Hands of Necromancy is one foot in Hexen, another foot in Metroidvania. Like Hexen, each chapter revolves around a hub world populated with portals that lead to other zones. Sometimes the portals are open willy-nilly, sometimes you have to unlock them, either through puzzle solving or finding the correct key. And like a Metroidvania, the player must also locate special abilities to traverse certain obstacles and progress to new zones. In this case, monster transformations. One annoying thing about Hexen was that it wasn't always clear exactly what the player should be doing next or where they should be going, and Necromancy sidesteps that issue by, well, blatantly telling the player. Upon finding a locked door, your objectives tab will be automatically updated, telling you what key you need to find and where to find it. Yeah, it may seem on the nose, and indeed there was a part of me that wished the dev found a more organic way to convey this information, but at the same time, it never actually feels like the game is holding your hand. You still have to find your way through these places and best the challenges with little hints, other than level design cues. It works, and there was never a dead end in this game that harshly halted my progress or flow. And frankly, if I was wandering around this game aimless and confused, it would have taken a huge chunk out of the fun factor. Combat for the most part is strong, smooth, and fun, as one would expect. I mean, at the end of the day, these are the classic Doom shooting mechanics that have been remixed a little. The starting flame staff is a good all-around damage dealer, and later on, weapons like the powerful scythe that shoots energy blades, and the pistol can cut down enemies with ease. I really enjoyed using the pistol too, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I also got a kick out of the beefy ice ring that pierces through enemies and leads them to a freezing, shattering death. As well as the tornado spell that's great for knocking baddies off cliffs, preferably into a river of molten magma. The only weapon that wasn't great was the melee sword. It's not horrible, but it carries the typical FPS melee weapon problem in that it's just plain awkward to use. It's hard to gauge how close you need to be to an enemy to use it, and it often leaves you unnecessarily vulnerable. Best for the enemies lower on the totem pole. One thing that kinda surprised me is that the game seemingly doesn't play with elemental weaknesses. I mean, there are certainly weapons that are better suited for certain enemies, make no doubt, but you know, when there's something like regular golems and ice golems, you'd think the Ring of Ice would be highly ineffective against the ice golems, but it actually kills them in roughly the same amount of shots as the normal ones. Conversely, flame weapons or flame monster abilities don't seem to have an elemental advantage either, past their raw power. To be fair, there's elemental perks, if you will. Once again, the tornado spell has a knockback effect, the ice spell freezes monsters, and certain fire attacks have lingering burn damage. But in terms of a fire trumps ice, wind trumps fire type rock, paper, scissors system, that's not here, and it kinda seems like the game is set up for it. Now, the combat is perfectly fine and fun without it, but I can't help but wonder what it would be like if it did have that dimension to it. What I will say though is that I enjoyed battling this enemy roster. There's a lot of variety, with each of them bringing something to the challenge. Zombies chuck bones at you, golems can send out shockwave attacks if you get too close, hellburners can divide the battlefield with their fire attacks, even the pest enemies and flying types are enjoyable to go up against and keep battles exciting. The only enemy that got on my nerves are these flying demons that can freeze you in place, and you bet they spam the hell out of it. For me, it's the combination of having my momentum halted and not having a ton of ways to defend myself that gets my blood boiling a little. Although I am still able to attack, so there is that. Throughout the game, you acquire transformation spells that not only turn you into some of the enemies, allowing you to use their attacks, but also allow you to traverse into areas not accessible in your default form. For instance, the snake can slither into small tight spaces, much like Samus's morph ball from Metroid. The Stonebreaker golems can punch through cracked walls, and the Hellburner can walk across pools of lava and acid. Players will get a lot of use out of these forms throughout each of the 3 chapters, and I'm happy to say all the forms are worthwhile to use in combat. Even the snakes, who has a bite attack I enjoyed using a little too much. Nom, 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 nom. However, attack power for each transformation is limited and has to recharge after use, so always relying on these forms in combat is not the wisest. All in all, the Metroidvania aspects here are executed strongly, although upon rolling credits, I couldn't help but feel they could have been pushed a little further. For starters, the game features plenty of secrets, rewarding health, ammo, support items, and certain weapons earlier, but unfortunately it doesn't feature any collectible upgrades to permanently increase your health or monster power, something that does tend to be a staple of these games. But more so, I wish the arsenal, or at least some of the arsenal, played a role in exploration and traversal, and not just combat. Take Metroid's Ice Beam, for example. It's able to freeze enemies in place, but those enemies can also be used for platforming after. Or the Explosive Gel in Batman Arkham Asylum. Valuable in combat, but it can also blow open weak walls. Like the elemental weaknesses, the lack of this isn't anything that hurts the experience, but not being able to use the arsenal for Metroidvania-ing feels like a missed opportunity to add further depth to the game. What I think is the strongest aspect of Hands of Necromancy is the level design. Sure, sometimes visually they aren't firing on all cylinders, as I pointed out, but all of them show off the developer's sharp design logic and precision. Level design is dense. In the first episode, maps aren't necessarily wide, but they are tall, stacked with verticality that winds and weaves throughout, allowing the player to discover looping, time-saving shortcuts, and plenty of hidden delights. And there's not much stopping a player from hopping off the main path and charting their own course, save the default jumping height. It all makes for fun, rewarding exploration. The farmhouse level in the first chapter is one of the highlights for me, as it represents all of these qualities. Essentially, you tackle this map on the outskirts, battling through canyons, pools of water, and barns, all the while opening up 2 large bridges that cut through the center of the map. Once your objective is completed, the bridges fast-track you right back to the hub portal, and when you later return to this map, which you might, you can get right back to where you need to go. That's how you do it right there. Make the players spend the time to reach their goal, and once they have it, get them out with a quickness. Despite a few rough aspects to the presentation and my wishing for certain aspects of the gameplay to be pushed further, overall Hands of Necromancy is a gem. A polished and tightly made GZDooM shooter that does a decent job balancing nostalgia with being its own thing. Those who are invested in the thriving GZDooM community should definitely give this one a look, along with those hungry for more FPS Metroidvanias. And we can't forget those die-hard Hexen fans who still daydream about what Hecatome might have been like. What are your thoughts on Hands of Necromancy? Be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and ring the bell for notifications on future uploads. It's a couple clicks for you and a massive help for this channel. And don't be shy, come say hi in the Kirk Collects Discord link below, and be sure to peek my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.